This is the first installment for the instructor 15 for 15. We also do these for students. Every Friday at 1 p.m. Central Time, we are conducting these instructor webinars for you to come through. Today we'll be focusing on tailoring a simulation for your class. We'll actually be walking through the course creation process, customizing a simulation. My name is Anthony Aluzzi. I am a client relationship consultant here at Capsim. I am here joined with...
Hi everyone, my name is Victoria Vasquez. I am also a client relationship consultant, and I will be joining Anthony, just helping out today.
Okay, so this is the professor pages. So for some of you new instructors, maybe you don't have an instructor account yet. If you don't, after our webinar today, I would encourage you to give us a call for our support line. We have a team here dedicated to, ensuring that we're going to, help to train you and create your simulation.
So also, just before we kind of get started and get going, no need to take notes. We're recording everything, so you can always find these webinars online later. So hopefully that's helpful to you now and in the future. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to ask those at the end. Anthony and I will have sort of like a Q&A session at the end that you can ask whatever you want. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Just one more note on that. Any specific questions that you might have for your industry. So let's say you have a course already set up and you have a specific question. We might not have time to address that question. If not, we apologize in advance. Please feel free to call us after our support line. Our support staff is more than willing to kind of accommodate any inquiry you have. So without further ado, let's go ahead and we'll jump into the course creation process. So again, this page is your professor pages. This is the first page you see when you actually log in to your instructor account. So it should look familiar to some of you instructors who have probably been using Capsim for some time now. So there's two ways to launch a course. There's one way on the left and there's one way on the right. I don't know, I just kind of like to stick to the left. It's where everything else is. So I always select launch a new course. Let me minimize that for you so you can actually see. Hopefully that's a little bit better.
Yeah, while you're adjusting that, I just kind of want to add, this is basically your first step. If you're intending to teach with one of Capsim simulations, the very first thing we need to do is create that course, and then right after it, the industry number to go with it. This is how we get the entire process started.
Exactly. So this is the first step of the course creation process, like Victoria mentioned. This is the simple agreement saying every student must register. You can take a look at this. In the future, we always just click yes, I agree. So for some of you instructors who have used Capsim in the past, you'll know that you do have the ability to reference a template that was previously used for one of your courses. Otherwise, for the new instructors that are joining us today, you can always just select start using the setup wizard. Which we will do today just for the sake of the course creation process webinar. So we're going to go ahead and select that option and click continue. So we're going to be asked to enter some information about our course. For some of you older instructors that have been using Capsim for a while, you might notice that the school name field is a little bit different. In the past, you could actually type in something. Now we've changed that to a drop-down menu because we've been cleaning up our school list just to kind of improve a lot of the data we have. It helps us to better support you. So since we are going to use Capsim Management Simulations as the shell or the university name, we're going to use that. We're going to click the campus, just Chicago, and then we're going to use its course title. So we're just going to type in webinar, section, type in 1 arbitrarily. Notice that the days of the week isn't a required field. It's not really imperative. Really where I see this being useful is if you have a couple different sections that you're facilitating, your students might be able to easily identify which section they belong to if you select these. So it's not really required in order to proceed, but you can select this if you want. Next, we're going to select the course level. When I set up courses, I don't know, I always just click undergraduate for some reason. Number of students. This is something you want to approximate. So we acknowledge that, at this part of the process, you may or may not know the exact number of students that you will be having go through the simulation. So for that reason, we kind of say just approximate, guesstimate using the best of your ability. The average course size, I would say, is probably 30. What would you say?
Yes, I would say it's about 30.
Okay, so we'll use 30. Course start date. I always recommend you just put the start date as today. It really doesn't impact anything. Where it might be helpful is if you kind of want to go into the simulation and peruse some of the resources, the course actually needs to be open. Technically, if you put the start date for some day in the future, it won't be open. You might be hindered to accessing some of those resources. So just to make it simple, I like to make it the first day. The end date, I'll just put, I don't know, 2 months out, March 31st. So again, this page is really just some basic information about your course. Some of this time can be saved if you are to use a template, which is what we talked about on the previous page.
Yeah, and I just want to add a couple of things. If you find that your university isn't on the list, you probably noticed the Add New button. You can add the new university. You can also add a campus if you find that you do have a university, but maybe not your campus. The more information, the more accurate, the better. It just keeps it nice and tidier and easier for you to launch a new course in the future. And then the other thing I wanted to point out too is quickly about the dates. These dates, the end date will determine sort of when the simulation is active and live in the system. You can always change the end date. So just like with the number of student count, end date you want to just approximate. If you don't have exactly the last day of the course, that's totally fine. You can pick a date that's, sometime after that. That's what I would recommend.
Great point. So we will go ahead and click continue onto the second step. The second step is selecting the actual product. So again, for some of you Capstone instructors who have used CapSim in the past, you'll notice that there are a couple new products here. I would encourage you to contact us to learn more about those if you haven't already. But for the sake of today's exercise, we're going to use Capstone. I think the course creation process is most complex for Capstone, at least when comparing it with Foundation. There's some fundamental differences between Capstone and Foundation that are actually listed here. So for starters, they're essentially very similar. The main simulation differences are that in Capstone, students are inheriting a larger company. So in Capstone, students are inheriting a $101 million company, and in Foundation, they're inheriting a $41 million company. So just the sheer size of the company is a lot smaller in Foundation. Additionally, the students will only have one product in their product portfolio when they actually take over in the Foundation simulation. In Capstone, they're going to inherit 5. So they have 5 products when they start in Capstone and 1 product when they start in Foundation. So again, not only is the company larger, there are more things to manage. There are more moving parts. To add more to that, Capstone, there are 5 different customer groups. So you have 5 products and 5 different customer groups that you can actually tailor your product to. This kind of leaves more room open for strategy, for some of you strategy instructors. Foundation, there are currently only 2 customer groups. So you have 1 product, 2 customer segments. You do have the ability in Foundation to create up to 4 new products, and in Capstone you can create up to 3 new products. So the grand total for Capstone, you can have up to 8 products in total at any given time. And Foundation, you can have up to 5. Victoria, anything you want to add on to that?
No, I mean just that this is a good description of the 2 of them, and like Anthony said, I encourage you all to, if you want to get to know one of our simulations, including Global DNA, which is our new international sim, please feel free to call us. Any of our support consultants would be happy to talk to you, in more detail about the differences. Exactly.
And maybe these 2 aren't exactly a fit for your course. We'd be more than happy to explore different ways we can, customize this for your course outside of this, the scope of the webinar today. So after you've selected your product, you're going to go ahead and click continue in the bottom right. Then you're asked if you want to include ethics. So you were really given 2 options here. There's a free ethics plugin that's included complimentary, and there's an ethics plugin that's an additional $10 per student. So the free ethics plugin actually gives you 1 ethical scenario that you can include in your course without adding on any additional charge. If you're interested in using ethics more than once, then you have to add the additional ethics plugin, which will cost each student $10. Again, like Victoria mentioned on the previous page, please feel free to call us. We'd be more than happy to walk you through kind of using this tool and where it might be best applicable. So I always just click the free ethics plugin, click continue, and then we have the option of selecting an exam. So currently we have 2 exams. We have CompXM, which is useful for assurance of learning purposes, and it's used by a lot of deans, accreditation officers, because this is a tool that gives you feedback to submit to AACSB, ACBSP, things like that for accreditation purposes. We also have CompXM Basics. This is a different exam we have. It's not useful for accreditation or assurance of learning. Where I see it best used is a final exam or a midterm. Again, please feel free to contact us more if you want any more information about CompXM or CompXM Basics. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to select CompXM for the sake of this webinar, and we're going to click Continue in the bottom right. Another additional option we can add on is an e-text. So we do have the e-text that can be found. So there's a side link when you log into your professor accounts. More information on that if you do give us a call, but this is something that you can add to your course. It will cost $25 additional per student. We'll go ahead and click Continue. We will just omit that for now. So here is where things kind of get a little bit hazy sometimes. So under payment options, so this in my opinion can be a little bit misleading because when you select students pay online, it doesn't mean that students can't pay at the bookstore. So students will always have the ability to pay online using a credit card, debit card, and or pre-purchase registration number, which they might receive at the bookstore. So if you do happen to select students pay at the bookstore, you definitely will want to get in touch with your bookstore and have them contact us to place an order. Keep in mind that sometimes the bookstores will mark up the price so they can make a profit on these because we sell them at the exact same price. So those are kind of two of the payment options, either pay at the bookstore or pay online. If you do select this, it doesn't mean students will not have the ability to pay online any and all times.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference there is just that if you do remember that, or you know, if it has been set up in the past that students pay at the bookstore, what this really serves as kind of is that reminder so that you can follow up with the bookstore to make sure that they have enough registration numbers and make sure that they're in contact with our people who manage that and coordinate that, so your students have the ability to purchase that registration number. So it's really kind of more of like a reminder to you, the two different options.
Definitely. On the bottom of this page, this is also kind of follows similar suit to the payment options. So you have the ability to have some team member guides shipped to you. So the team member guide for some of you new instructors is kind of the manual. It's kind of like the instruction manual you get with any product that is going to be very useful for the student and for the instructor. But the students are going to rely on them during decision making because they do have a lot of the rules, the parameters, and the framework associated between different departments. So you can have some shipped to you. Typically, we like to say, let's say you only approximate 20 students for your course. It might be safe to send 25 or 30 just in case. They're free, so there's no additional charge to you. Typically, they get sent out the day after the order is placed. So if I were to place this order right now for 30 team member guides, they would probably be shipped out tomorrow. You can also include a printed professor guide for you if that's something of interest to you. Member guide in its most updated format from their student account. So the main difference here is having a tangible copy. Some instructors feel that students are more likely to reference those if they have a physical copy in front of them rather than just a PDF. Would you agree with that, Victoria?
Yeah, and then the other thing is to remember is just because you ship them doesn't mean that they won't be available online either. So it's not like they're not mutually exclusive options. Only that if you choose that students will download team member guides, they won't have that hard copy. But if they have the hard copy, they'll always have the downloaded version online available to them as well. So it's really just giving them that extra copy, like Anthony said, something tangible, something they can flip through, something they can read as a homework assignment.
You got it. So the choice is essentially yours for both of these options. And worst case scenario, you select the wrong option or you say, you know what, I changed my mind, you can always contact us and we'd be more than happy to send you some after the fact too. So those are kind of some of your options with respect to payment and shipping team member guides versus just downloading them. We'll go ahead and we'll actually just download. We don't want to ship anything to the office here. We'll go ahead and click Continue.
Yeah, by the way, I kind of want to just throw in and mention that we're building this course, and we said that this is the first step that you need to take when you're getting ready to teach with one of Capstone simulations. We can, if you mess up, if you need to go back, you need to edit, you'll have plenty of checkpoints to do that. But we can also start over. None of this is set in stone. We can go back and help you and assist you in any way that we can so that we get it right. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is feel free to, experiment with this, and you're not going to ruin anything. Nothing is, everything we can change, and everything is reversible.
Definitely. Everything is editable, like Victoria said, after the fact. So we're almost done with actually creating the shell for the course. So this is really where we're just going to review a lot of the information we've selected so far. If everything does look correct, typically we go ahead and just select Create Course in the bottom right. Everything appears to look correct to me. I'm going to go ahead and click Create Course. All right, so we do have two options. Typically, I always click Set Up Industries Now as opposed to Set Up Industries Later. I don't really see a disadvantage in doing either, but I like to just select this to get it kind of finalized and set in stone. So we'll click Set Up Industries Now. So the first option you have available to you is selecting the economic scenario. So currently there are 3 that you can select from. So we have the standard scenario, which is a constant growth model. So just to kind of give you some frame of reference here, the standard scenario implies that, let's say in round 1, one of your customer segments is growing at 10%. In round 2, it'll also grow at 10%. In round 3, it'll also grow at 10%. So not necessarily realistic for the real world, but it helps to kind of eliminate one of those variables that students will have to acclimate with when kind of jumping into the simulation.
I also think that from the professor perspective, using the standard scenario is a little easier to teach with because you know the kind of results you can expect. You've seen it before. You can easily calculate what sales might be on average 5-6 years out because you know what that constant growth rate is.
You're exactly correct. And going off that too, some of the exercises that we have built into the software for the students are built around the standard scenario. So it makes those exercises easier simply because they're already kind of tuned to this specific scenario.
Definitely.
The growth scenario is a little bit different. It's still a positive economic scenario, but there's a little bit of variation. So let's say in round 1 you'll have a 10% growth rate, round 2 maybe 12, round 3 7%. So you'll notice it's all positive. The industry is growing, but there's some fluctuation. The third is exactly how it sounds. It's just a recession. This is really when you want to throw your students a curveball. Up until round 5, you'll have a growth scenario. In round 5, the economy will collapse, and then you're followed by a 2-round slight recovery. So again, for some more frame of reference here, typically you see the recession scenario used in master's or MBA level courses if you think your students can handle the fluctuation in industry, growth, and standard. You typically see used more for undergraduate at any level. So I know when I took this course at DePaul, I think it was just the standard scenario. It didn't make it any less challenging. It just kind of eliminated one of the variables inside of the software. So just for the sake of the simplicity, we're going to go ahead and click Standard and click Continue. So to make things more adaptable or more versatile depending on your your course outcomes, your learning outcomes, you can actually customize the scenario too. So you can leave it with no customization. You can randomize some things like the growth rates, interest rates, and the offsets, or you can customize it specifically. So if you select Customize, you as the instructor have the ability to physically enter how you want the industry to grow. Some things I've seen in the past are some instructors will know that maybe a lot of students will leave the performance segment in Capstone, for example. To entice students to stay there, maybe you can have that segment grow more. So that's just one practical application of how you might be interested in using a custom scenario. For more specific examples or maybe kind of tweaking yours specifically, I would probably give your client relationship consultant a call. But that's kind of the options you have available to yourself. Victoria, anything?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, again, just like with the standard growth rate, leaving it with no customization is going to be the easiest to teach with. Using the customize or the Monte Carlo or the custom approach is going to give your course a little bit more of an experimental flair to it. So just keep that in mind. I mean, it's up to you. You can manage it however you want to manage it. But that's just leaving it as no customization might be the easiest to manage from an administrative perspective.
I would agree entirely. And also, too, at the bottom here, you do have some information about some of these options, too, which kind of just recap what we're talking about today. But chances are maybe you'll miss that or maybe you don't feel like kind of diving so deep into that. So that's kind of the purpose of today's webinar. We'll go and click None. We can't really, I guess, customize so in-depth just the standard scenario, so we'll go ahead and click Continue. This step is also a little bit misleading. So option 1 says, physically, do you want to give all of the students in your course the ability to join a company from their student interface? So it's not to say that in class you can't say, all right, guys, form your teams. I'm giving you 5 minutes. It's really saying, do you want to give them the ability? Option 2 is what most of us, I think, recommend here, simply because inevitably you might have 1 or 2 students who join the wrong company or join the wrong team, and then they're going to come to you and say, hey, can you move me to the correct team? It creates more work for you. So oftentimes, more than not, it might be just a good idea for you to say, okay, once you've selected your teams, let me know. I'm going to physically move you onto your appropriate team, which is what option 2 is. So I'm going to go ahead and click option 2. I kind of tend to prefer that option. We'll go ahead and click continue. Almost done with the industry creation. So we have 2 different options here. We have the ability to set up a capstone tournament or a capstone foot race. And this is kind of where that approximation comes in from the first page of the course creation. So a tournament is typically used with smaller student quantities. So if you have, under 85, I guess is what I recommend here, but this is where students are going to compete head-to-head with their peers. So this recommends putting 5 students on each team. We see typically average 4 to 6 students per team when you're actually in class operating a tournament scenario. In a foot race, a little bit different. You can actually have one person or have a team all competing on the same team against 5 computer teams. This is really good for standardization when you have larger classes, because the computers are all making pretty much the same decisions. The only variable here is the students' team's decisions. So definitely very useful. Those are kind of a brief, high-level view of tournament versus foot race. You do have the ability to customize your own. Let's say these 2 options aren't really for you. You don't really want to do either of these. You can always kind of create your own tournament or your own capstone foot race, selecting one of these options. I'm pretty satisfied with the first one. I'm just going to go ahead and select continue. So the last option, and this is probably the main basis for choosing capstone versus foundation, is because capstone, you have the ability to add in or remove 4 additional modules. Those 4: HR, TQM, labor negotiations, and advanced marketing. In foundation, you only have the ability to turn on or off human resources and total quality management. So again, just another variable that you can fool around with capstone that you can't in foundation. Typically, I would recommend leaving HR and TQM on where they're defaulted to, so HR in 2 and TQM in 4, just because they're very simple, and again, it really comes down to what your learning outcomes are. If you know your students are going to be a little bit overwhelmed initially, you can remove them entirely. But either way, I would kind of discuss this more with your client relationship consultant. These things can definitely help to aid the learning outcomes of some of your course, depending on if you're teaching a conflict resolution class or a strategic marketing class. Some of these things might be turned on or off depending on what you're teaching. So I'm pretty satisfied with just the default HR in 2, TQM in 4, because it's also consistent with the balanced scorecard, which is used by many instructors for evaluative purposes. I'm just going to go ahead and click continue. The last step is just reviewing again. So similar to how we reviewed the process for the course creation, now we're looking at the industry creation. I'm satisfied with this. I'm going to go ahead and click Create Industries. Let it think for just a second. Usually this step takes, is pretty reliant on your internet connection, and there we have it. So disregard a lot of these other courses I have here. The one that we just created is this webinar course right here. This is what it will look like when you do create a course. The title will be listed here, the edition, and also the industry ID. That will be more discussed more, I think, at the next webinar, where we're going to talk about the registration process and how this number is going to be used to aid student registration. So that's pretty much the end of the content portion. Let's jump into some of the questions to see what we have. Let's see. Victoria, do you want to?
Yeah, so we got a question here. Do you have to have computer teams, like do they all have to be student teams in the industry? I think that's kind of what the question is getting at.
So the answer is no. So again, it does come down to a lot of things. So how big is your class? How many students are going to be in your class? And do you want them competing against each other or against computers? So the option is entirely up to you. We recommend having at least 6, or having a base of 6. We always recommend having a base of 6 because there are some reports that actually compare your course at your university to other similar courses around the world. And to be comparable to these other courses, you need to have a certain setup for your course. So one of those requirements is having 6 total teams, regardless of whether it's computer or participant. So if you only have enough students for, let's say, 4 teams, it might be a good idea to add 2 computer teams. Or, if you say, hey, I don't want any computers, you can simply remove yourself from having 6 teams, and you can only have 4 participant teams, but you would remove yourself from the eligibility. So it depends on, really what you're interested in. Really, some of those reports are really bragging rights for the instructor, saying, my students are in the 90th percentile across, across the world. So sometimes universities and instructors like to showcase that. Therefore, they kind of keep 6 teams, and they kind of manage it with, depending on how many students they already have in their course. I mean, before I comment on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess just to recap, sort of, you have up to 6 slots, I would call them, 6 companies that can compete in any one given industry. And those 6 slots can either be managed by a student team, they can be managed by the computer, or they can be inactive. And you can make any type of configuration within those 6 spots that you want. You can have 3 computer teams, 3 student teams. Like Anthony said, you could have 4 student teams and then have the 2 remaining companies be inactive, so they're not even included in the industry. Obviously, some of those choices, like Anthony says, are going to have some implications on some of the reports or like the balanced scorecard evaluation comparisons that we make. But it's really your choice.
Exactly. Yeah. Next question.
Next question. What does a little green button mean with the plus sign?
Okay. So this actually allows you to add another industry. So we can click this just for the sake of the webinar. We'll click that, and we actually have the ability to let's scroll down here. So you can we're creating an entirely new industry. So let's say in the future, when you created this course, you said 30 students were going to be in it. Maybe 15 more enrolled late, or the enrollment opened a little bit. So you have the ability to create an entirely new industry associated to the course we just created. So we can select what teams are going to be computer and or participant or off. So if we want to create a team with 6 total participants, we go ahead and click continue. And on the subsequent page, right after it's done thinking, again, it'll take just a second, pretty reliant on the internet connection here. All right. So Melissa, again, this is the course we created. This was the initial course, and now we have an additional industry that we can actually populate students into. So both are going to be facilitated under this main mother course, but you have 2 independent industries from one another. So you'll have students in this one and students in this one competing independently in their own industry. If the opposite occurs, maybe you create 2 industries and you say, hey, my student enrollment actually went down from what I anticipated it would be, you can actually remove that also by clicking this red icon, as long as no students are actually enrolled in the course. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove this just for the sake of the webinar. Click delete this industry, and there you have it. So it actually disappears, it's kind of out of the way, and you don't really need to use it. So kind of both situations apply. So hopefully that helps to answer your question. We are out of questions, actually. So
I'm out of time, too. So
yeah, I apologize. Maybe we went over a tiny bit. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Before we kind of sign out, I wanted to show you all where to enroll for webinars that are coming up. Actually, we added a new webinar link right on your professor pages. I probably should have covered that, but we'll go to the events page where the student webinars are hosted to. You can always point your students to this. So we're just at the CAPSIM homepage. We'll go ahead and we'll click events, and then we're going to go ahead and click webinars. And then there are a couple different ones here. So we have professional webinars where you might be interested in attending any future sessions. This is the tailored for your class webinar. We also have student webinars too. The first one was recorded and posted here. This one was actually recorded yesterday. So this one will be up probably by Monday. But in any case, this is where you would enroll either, regardless of whether you're an instructor or a student, for the webinars. This is definitely where you could do that. Like I mentioned at the beginning, all the webinars for instructors will take place on Fridays. At 1 p.m. Central Time, approximately 30 minutes. The first 15 minutes is the content. The second 15 minutes is for your questions.
Yeah, and then finally, if we can just, Anthony, can we show really quick how to contact us? If there are any questions after today's webinar, feel free to get in touch with us, call us, email us. We would be happy to keep talking to you about your courses.
Yeah, so this is our toll-free number if you're calling from North America. Otherwise, feel free to dial this number. We also generally, a lot of our inquiries are addressed to sales, accounting, but this is our main support email address. So if you do have any questions, maybe you don't want to give us a call, you can always shoot us an email directly to our CAPSIM support inbox. Someone will try to address that within an hour. We have an hour response policy here. Otherwise, that concludes today's webinar. Thank you all for attending. We hope to see you next Friday at the next webinar.
Thank you. Bye.